Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video here on the World War II Solitaire board game channel. Today we're going to be playing the Winds of War, Japan Strikes Back at America. And there is one thing I want to discuss before we start playing this game, that this game actually isn't a solitaire game, and this game actually doesn't have a solo mode. It has never claimed to have a solo mode, but the game itself, if you read on the package, it says the game may be played by 1 or 2 players. And that led me to believe that it had a solo mode, or that it was a cooperative style. Because usually if the box says the game may be played by 1 or 2 players, that's the case. However, I am gonna cut this game some slack, and that is because this game is old. It's from 2008, so it's soon going to be 14 years old. And if we look back 14 years ago, we had another kind of solitaire war game industry than we have today. I mean, today we have the Valiant Defense series. We have, so many from DVG. They're just, making so many of these leader series, and we have Gregory Smith's narrative games. We have so many solo games that if we would read on the back of a box, the game may be played by 1 or 2 players, I think everyone would assume that the game had solitaire mode. But back in 2008, I don't think that was the case, because we had, like I said, a very different market. Solo was not nearly as big as it is today, and multiplayer games with dedicated solo modes, I don't know if there was a single one. I mean, I have quite a big collection, and I think my oldest multiplayer game, perhaps that's Awakening the Bear, but then again, you would have to go and buy the solo expansion to play that solo, so it doesn't come with the box. So that is why we're gonna give this game some slack. And also, if we read on Boardgame Geek, the Boardgame Geek entry, it says 1 to 2 players. That also says the game may be played by 1 or 2 players. If we read on Against the Odds magazine's website, which is LPS, the publisher of Against the Odds magazine, it says it plays well as a solo game, or the second player gets to monkey with balloon paths and die rolls. So anyway, once we've discussed all of that, the game itself is quite simple, and therefore it's not very difficult to play it solo. And I don't enjoy playing games two-handed, because those kind of games I prefer to play with another human. But since the game is so simple, it's quite easy to make your enemy automatic. And the game, like I said, on the Against the Odds magazine website, it says it plays well as a solo game, or the second player gets to monkey with balloon paths and die rolls. So that kind of indicates that they think you should play the US player and then play it against the Japanese being automated, since it says that the second player gets to monkey with balloon paths and die rolls if you don't play solo. But I've played this solo both as the US and the Japanese, and I gotta say, I think it's much better and simpler to play as the Japanese than it would be to play the US. So anyway, before we get playing, I am gonna give you a quick just detail how to play the game. And since this is the first time that we're playing, we're also gonna go ahead and set up the game. So first of all, over here on the left, we have the Japanese victory points. We have 2 markers for that, one for 1 and one for 10, and both of them are gonna start on the 0. And then we have balloon groups. These are previously launched groups. We need 4 kind of markers to put on those. You can have anything, a coin, a button, a dead potato bug, whatever you want. And then we have Japanese activity and US resource track. So we have a marker for that, and that will start on 0 for the Japanese activity and 10 for the US resources. And then we have our turn counter here, whatever you want to call that. turn track, it should be called. And it goes from 1 to 4 because we have 4 turns. And that should start obviously on the first one. Okay, and we have 30 balloons, so have them in a nice pile. And then we have all of the US resource counters, and I recommend just to have them in a cup. And I like to complement the cup with 2 additional markers. We're gonna get into the rules in a bit, but basically the US player or the automated one, which I use, can use 2 of these resource counters for every burst of air the Japanese rolls. And to remember how many you've used, because if you roll a 12, a burst of air can go on for a few minutes, and then it can be hard to remember, did I use or did the US use any resource counters this burst of air or not. So then when I use one, I simply put one of these, and then as I roll for a new burst of air, I take them back. And then we have our American terrain counters. They have a T on the back. And what we want to do with these is we want to turn them all. Basically, we can go into what kind of terrain they are before we turn them. Basically, we have 5 or 6, actually, 6 types of terrain. So let's line them all up here. Okay, so these are our 6 types of terrain. So this is going to be desert, and a balloon landing there is not going to do anything. Then we have a forest here, and if the balloon lands in a forest, we're going to roll a d6, and on a roll of 1, the Japanese gets 4 VP, he kills civilians. On a roll of 2, it starts a fire and achieves 3 VP. On a roll of 3, it's only sighted. There's no damage, but the Japanese player gets 1 VP. And any roll over 3 is going to be 0 VP. And then we have fields. And the fields work the same as the cities. And for a roll of 1, you get 5 VP, you kill civilians. For a roll of 2, you get 2 VP for starting a fire. And for a roll of 3, it's only sighted. You don't cause any damage, but you get 1 VP. And then we have I believe this is a military base. And in the military base, on a roll of 1, you get 8 VP. You cause an explosion and kill civilians. On a roll of 2 to 3, you get 3 VP. It sets areas on fire. And on a roll of 4, it's only sighted, no damage. And roll of 5 to 6, it's going to do nothing. And then we have the last one. I believe it's some kind of power plant or something like that. And on a roll of 1, we get 10 VP. We cause an explosion and destroy a building. On a roll of 2, we get 5 VP for destroying power lines. And on a roll of 3, it's only sighted, no damage, but we get 2 VP. And those are the different kind of terrains that the US player or the US bot will defend. So what we're going to do now is we're going to turn all of these. You don't have to watch me doing this. Okay, so we turned all of them. We don't know which one is which one, and now we're just going to go ahead and shuffle them. And once you have shuffled all of these terrain markers, the US players, according to the rules, can place them on any cloud he wants, except the ones that is out in the Pacific Ocean. And to make it simple, my recommendation is that if you play as either the US or the Japanese, just go ahead and place them out on these clouds which do not have any letters on them. Even if you play by the rules, the ones with the E, that means a balloon has went out of its way, so you can't place them on the E's. You can place them on the C's, and the C stand for coastline or coast. So just go ahead and place these out. And again, I'm going to do this for you. Okay, so we got them all placed out, and that actually means that we're now ready to play. So let's quickly just go through the rules. They're real simple, and the reason why we're going to do this, I usually don't do this when I do my playthrough videos. We discuss the rules as we play, but since we're kind of making our own solo bot here, I just briefly want to discuss the rules so you see what I'm doing here. Okay, so like I said, you can choose whatever you want to play as the US or the Japanese, but I highly recommend playing as the Japanese. It's going to be way more fun, way more simple, and I think it's also going to be a little bit more meaningful. But again, before we go into that discussion, let's briefly discuss the flow of the game and the rules of the game. Okay, so the game is played in 4 turns. At the start of each turn, the Japanese player will decide how many balloons he wants to launch. He can launch 15, 20, 25 or 30 balloons. After he's launched that amount of balloons, he'll put a marker. For example, let's say at the first turn I want to launch 25 balloons. I put a marker on that, and then for the next 3 turns I can only choose the other 3 options. And the reason why I have to choose also is for the next turn. So this one is going to start at the amount of previously launched balloons. So for example, for the next turn number 2, this is going to start over here, because by turn number 2 I would have been launching 25 balloons. And depending on how many balloons I previously launched, that's going to determine the amount of these resource counters that the US players will get at the start of each turn. So at the beginning of the game, the first turn, we can see we have 0 previously released balloons, and the US player is going to get 10 resource counters. And the same goes for next turn. If I decide to launch 25 balloons, the US player is going to get 10 resource counters. But however, if I choose to launch 30 instead of 25, for next turn, the US player is going to get 15 resource counters. So that's something to keep in mind, because you kind of have to be a little bit smart about how you choose to, which amount of balloons you want to send out, because you don't want to give the US player too many of these resource counters. Okay, so anyway, so say that I choose, for simple reasons, I'm going to choose 20, and we have 30 balloon counters. So on this, it's S clouds, that stands for start. I'm going to sort out my counters, and that is also pretty easy. Before I put 2 of them in any space, I have to put 1 of them in every space. And before I put 3 of them in any space, I have to put 2 of them in any space. So the way I do this, if I play the US player, is I just put them evenly out. So if I have 10 of them, 1 of them in each track. 20 of them, 2 of them in each track. If I have 25 of them, I simply put 3 in 1, 2 in 1, 3 in 1, 2 in 1, and so on. So again, just as evenly as possible. And then when you're done with that, it's time to start playing. Okay, so like I said, the game has 4 turns. And in 1 turn, the turn will last until all of the Japanese players' balloons have either been shot down, downed, or soared away or attacked their target. So all of the balloons have to go away before the next turn starts. So the way the game works is that the Japanese player will roll for a burst of air by rolling 2d6, and then he will get his kind of action points. So this time we're rolling 8. So there is only 3 things you can do with your action points, or actually there is just 2 things. Excuse me. The first thing is moving. And the cost of moving, I don't know if you can see it very well. Well, you can see a little bit, I see here. But basically the cost of moving is depending on the arrows, the amount of arrows from one cloud to the next. So for example, we can see here that moving this balloon from this cloud to that cloud is going to cost us 1 movement point because it's just 1 arrow. However, moving this balloon to this cloud is going to cost us 2 movement points because there's 2 arrows. This one could also choose to go down south for just 1 movement point. But as you move, so I've used now 2 movement points with this balloon, 1 movement point with that balloon. I spent 3 movement points or action points, and I have 5 action points remaining. Moving into a target, for example, let's say this balloon spends 1 more point here and then 2 more points, because that's 2 arrows, so that's 3 movement points. So I have, let's see, should go from 5 to 2 action points remaining. And that's great, because with the last 2 action points I can attack or take my balloon down, and that costs 2 action points to reveal the terrain and attack it. And you always have to, if you reveal it, you always have to attack it. You can't just reveal it, unfortunately. So if that revealed terrain ends up being a desert, my balloon has been wasted. And for every burst of air, that's every roll here, the US player can use 2 resource chits. So let's quickly discuss the resource chits or counters. I'm gonna stop using that word because with my accent it's not a good fit, I think. Okay, let's see if we can find them all. There are a couple of letters. There should be a D and an E. There we got the D. Should be an E as well. So you will draw these blindly at the beginning of every round. So you're not gonna know beforehand what you get, but once you've drawn them, of course, you're gonna know what they do. Okay, so we have numbered 1 and numbered ones, and we have lettered ones. So for the numbered ones, we have 1, 2, and 3, and what they do, it's quite simple. So the US player can use his 1s, 2s, 3s to move the Japanese balloon during the movement phase. So for example, if I am here, I spend 1 movement point to move over here. The US player could use a 2 counter and actually move this Japanese balloon out of the US player's harm's way. So that's one way he could use them to make my balloons worthless. But he also uses them when I attack different kind of terrains. If I attack one of these attackable terrains, he will use these counters to modify my roll. And basically, as you know, I want to roll 1 to 3 on most of these targets. And if he would add a 2, for example, play one of these 2 counters, the roll would be +2. So I will only hit on a 1. On this one, the 3, it's going to be a +3. So it's, whatever I roll is going to be worthless unless I'm attacking this military installation, where actually 4 is a decent roll. So that's how the numbered 1 rolls works. And then we have the lettered ones. So we have the A, and that's a fighter. So he simply shoots down a balloon. And then we have B, which cancels a fire. Remember, fires starts in 2 of these areas. The woods, 3 of them. The woods, the fields, the villages on a roll of 2 or 3. Number C, that downs a moving balloon. So if I'm moving with a balloon, the US player can down it, and he can down it in a desert or in a coastline where it's not going to do anything good, basically wasting that balloon. And then we have a D, and the D cancels any explosions. Explosions can occur in the military installation and the power station. And the last one, that's an E, and that's a counter which the US player can use after the Japanese kills the first civilians. After that, the US gives public information about the Japanese balloons, and there can be no more civilian deaths in all of the game. So that is a powerful counter. So basically that is how the game works. The Japanese player will keep track of his victory points here with the counters tracking the victory points. And the goal of the game for the Japanese is to get 50 victory points before the game has ended. And for the US player, the goal is to not let the Japanese get 50 victory points. So how do we play this solo? Okay, so let's start with the easy version. The easy version of playing this solo is playing the Japanese. You just play it by the rules. You are going to want to find, you are turning these as many as you need. You'll want to when I play it, I want to find the military installation or the power station, because that is the easiest way to get victory. And you're just gonna play it by the rules. But for the US player, which is rather simple, because the only thing the US player can do is play these resource counters. The US player can't do anything else. So the way you play these resource counters, you play it by the game, and you have them all lined up, and then you simply play them at the earliest convenience. And of course, you're not going to play them if they're useless, but that's not going to happen, because, like I said, there's not many of them. For example, the numbered ones, you're going to play them, one of them when you attack one of these places with your balloon. And the letters ones shoot down. You shoot one randomly down you can choose one at the earliest convenience, which is right now. Cancel fire, use it when there's a fire. Down moving balloon, use it when you're moving a balloon over a empty area or a desert area. Cancel explosion, use it when you cause an explosion. This one that cancels civilian kills, use it after the first civilian kills. That's the earliest time that you can play it. So that is rather simple, and that actually works quite well. Your goal is to get 50 victory points, and playing these US counters, again, just at the earliest convenience. And that's how you play this game as the Japanese. So playing this game as the US is a little bit more difficult, and I also want to say it's not as fun, because the game loses a lot of its meaning. Like, I think the meaning of the game, again, is to find the very good kind of terrain, because that is one thing I forgot about the rules, and that's going to be the last of my bumbling of these. But basically, after the first turn, after the third turn, you will take all of the terrain markers that have been revealed, and you will shuffle them again, and then you're going to go ahead and put them out. So you, as a Japanese player, you have to remember, so if you got one of these good ones, you will know that one of the shuffled ones, one of the revealed ones, is going to be one of the good ones. And then you have to remember which one of these counters have been revealed or not. So that is, a great challenge that is lost when you play as a US player, because, again, as a US player, the only thing you do is play these resource counters. So again, to play as the US, you will just load up your Japanese as evenly as possible. I would recommend launching balloons in the historical, it's explained in the rules, in the historical way, which is 15, 20, 30, and lastly 25. And then when you do your burst of wind, you will do that as normally. You will roll and you will get a 10, and then we have 10 balloons. It costs 1 movement point. Just move all of them once. And I like to go left to right. So for the next one, now we went left. We started with this one. We go on the right, and we have a few balloons here. So we have 7. So we start with the ones on the 7. The ones on the right. If we have 2 different ways, we keep going with this left to the right rule. So we have, let's say we have 2 of them that can do actually this. So for the first one, we are going from the right now. The first one takes the left path, and the second one, which has 2 paths, takes the right path. So just left to right, left to right. And then as they attack, they will just attack the first terrain that they meet. And if they found, they will go automatically. You will not aim them. They will go automatically. And then if they come to an area with revealed terrain, which is not desert, they will attack again. And instead of 50 victory points, the Japanese only needs 20 victory points to win, because the Japanese is greatly handicapped by this, not trying actively to find these very beneficial areas to bomb. It's greatly, the dangers of it is it's greatly reduced. And I've actually noticed that I've been speaking for like 25 minutes. So I think I'm going to do 2 videos. I'm going to do one video which is going to be how to play the Winds of War. And then I'm going to do a separate playthrough video, because otherwise it's just going to be too long. So anyway, my friends, that is how you play the Winds of War solo. Or, you know, two-handed or whatever. But that's how I like to play it solo. And I think, again, playing it it's not a true solitaire game, but playing it as the Japanese and just using, because the US player don't do a lot, just drawing these according to the US resource track, play them at the earliest convenience. It works great, because it's actually quite hard to get 50 victory points. That's not an easy task for a Japanese player. So thank you very much for watching. Again, you can get the Winds of War on the Against the Odds magazine website. $21.95 shipped in the US, $34.95 shipped internationally. And stay tuned, because as soon as I turn off this recording, I'm gonna start recording the playthrough video playing as the Japanese. Thank you for watching very much, and please don't forget to subscribe.